October 17, 1971. A small, unassuming post office in San Fernando, California. An envelope, ordinary in every way, passes over the counter. It is addressed to Dean Martin, the Beverly Hills. The return address is a name no one knows, a place no one would ever think to look. A public school teacher in Burbank. This was not fan mail. It was not a script. It was a confession and a plea. And when Dean Martin opened it, he did something no Hollywood star has ever done before or since. He broke an unspoken rule. He crossed a line the studios had drawn in blood and money and power. He went off book. In doing so, he exposed the dark, beating heart of the machine that made him. He showed the world that the Dean Martin you thought you knew, the drunk, the crooner, the king of cool, was the greatest performance of his life. And it was about to cost him everything. Let's rewind the film. Let's go back before the Rat Pack, before the Copa, before the millions, to Steubenville, Ohio. The air isn't clean here. It tastes of coal dust and steel mill smoke. Young Dino Krusty isn't dreaming of Hollywood. He's dreaming of a way out. His father, a barber, looks at those hands too soft for the mills. He sees a singer. But in Steubenville, you don't get out by being soft. You get out by being tough, by being smarter, quieter, harder than anyone else. Dino learned that lesson before he learned the lyrics to his first song. You keep your cards close, you protect what's yours, and you never, ever show them you're scared. The war comes, a bad ear keeps him out, the road opens up, not the open road of freedom but the back roads between Cleveland and Detroit, singing for pennies in mob-owned clubs. The Shea Parry, the Latin Quarter. The air is blue with smoke, the stages are sticky with spilled gin, and the owners have eyes like dark, empty pockets. They pay in cash. They own the cops. They own the liquor license. They own you. Dean learned another lesson here, one that would sink into his bones. In this world, there are only two kinds of people. The ones who take orders and the ones who give them. And the quickest way to move from one column to the other is to make people believe you don't care. To make your smile a wall. Fast forward through the flashing bulbs, Martin and Lewis, the screaming crowds, the unprecedented volcanic fame, but watch Dean's eyes in those newsreels. When Jerry is flailing, sweating, begging for love, Dean is still, a statue, smoking, watching. He is the straight man in a comedy act, but he is playing a deeper, darker straight man to all of Hollywood. He is learning the studio game now. The contracts written in invisible ink. The handshake deals that bind tighter than chains. The columnists who build you up on Monday and tear you down on Thursday, all on the orders of a studio head whose name you'll never see in the papers. The act explodes. It was always going to, and Dean walks away into the solo spotlight, but he doesn't walk alone. He walks straight into the waiting embrace of a new kind of family, the Summit, the Rat Pack, Frank's clan, and with Frank came the shadow world. The world of the Calneva Lodge of Sam Gincana, sitting by the pool of phones that were tapped and favors that were called in. Dean was no puppet. He was a partner, a silent partner. He understood the calculus perfectly. The mob had the muscle. The studios had the distribution. And the stars. The stars were the beautiful, smiling product in the middle. To survive, you had to be friends with everyone and owe nothing to anyone. You had to be untouchable. And so he built the persona. Dean Martin, the amiable drunk, the man who couldn't care less. The glass in his hand wasn't just a prop, it was a moat. The slurred speech and the stumbling walk, a brilliant, deliberate disguise. It made him harmless. It made him lovable. It made the dangerous men around him think he was no threat. He was just Dino. Good old Dino. Meanwhile, he was watching, calculating, building an empire of his own. Records, movies, the television show, all while maintaining a careful, respectful distance from the true sources of power. He was walking a high wire over an abyss, and his smile was his balance pole. But the 60s end. The world cracks open. The old rules start to crumble. The mob's grip on Hollywood is pried loose by federal indictments and RICO statutes. The studio system gasps its last breath. And Dean, he's still on top, but the landscape below has changed. The wire is shaking. And then in 1969, the unthinkable happens. His son, Dean Paul Dino, enlists in the Air Force. He becomes a pilot. This is the first crack in the facade. The son is doing what the father never had to. He is choosing duty, service, raw and real danger over the manufactured safety of the spotlight. For Dean, the king of detachment, this is an agony he cannot drink away. His boy is in the sky and he is on the ground, helpless. Which brings us back to that envelope. It arrives at a mansion in Beverly Hills, a fortress of success, but inside the man is fraying. The nation is at war, not just overseas but in the streets. The youth are rebelling against everything his generation built. His own son is part of that machine. And here in this plain envelope is a letter from a man named John R. L. Thompson, a history teacher at John Burroughs High School in Burbank. He is not writing to a star. He is writing to a father. The letter is a confession. Thompson has been teaching his students about the myths of war, about the glory and the horror. He has shown them graphic footage from Vietnam. And his students, these privileged kids in the shadow of the studios, have reacted with scorn, with laughter. They see it as just another movie, a boring, badly made movie. They cannot or will not connect the images of real death with their own reality of convertibles and beach parties. Thompson is devastated. He has failed. And in his despair, he does something radical. He writes to Dean Martin. He says that Dean's son, Dean Paul, is serving in that war. He asks, pleads, would Dean Martin be willing to come to his classroom, to talk to these kids, to make it real? Think of the sheer, breathtaking audacity of this. In the Hollywood ecosystem, stars are protected like rare jewels. Their time is monetized down to the minute. Their public appearances are calculated for maximum promotional value. A star does not just go to a public school. He does not answer the plea of a random teacher. The system would have filtered this letter out. An assistant would have sent a signed photo. A PR man would have called it a scheduling conflict. The wall between the galaxy of stardom and the planet of normal, struggling life was absolute, impermeable, and fiercely guarded. But Dean Martin read the letter, and he saw his son's face in every word. He didn't call his publicist. He didn't tell NBC. He didn't check with Frank or the suits at the Sands. He picked up the phone himself. He called John Thompson at his school, and he said yes. Now, if stories like this matter to you, if you believe that the true measure of a legend isn't the spotlight but the shadows they illuminate when no one is watching, then you're in the right place. This is Hollywood Untold Files. We don't just replay history. We hunt for the moments they tried to erase. And if you're still with me, you understand that the real story is always hiding in the silence between the headlines. The day arrives. A plain sedan, not a limousine, pulls up to John Burroughs High. There is no press, no cameras, no security detail, just Dean Martin in a sober suit walking into a building that smells of chalk and adolescent sweat. The students are assembled. They are skeptical. They see an icon, a fossil from their parents' world. They expect a show, a joke, a song. They do not get Dean Martin. They get Dino Krusty. They get a father. He doesn't sing. He doesn't tell a single joke. He walks to the front of the room and he looks at these children, these same children who laughed at the carnage, and he begins to speak. His voice is quiet. No microphone. No bravado. He talks about his son. He talks about what it means to wait for a phone call that might not come. He describes the sound of a mother crying herself to sleep. He strips away every layer of cool, every ounce of the persona, and he shows them the raw, pulsing fear of love in wartime. He makes it personal. He makes it unbearable. He makes it real. Witnesses said you could hear a pin drop. Then you could hear the soft sounds of crying. These teenagers who thought they knew everything, who thought war was a video, were finally seeing it. Not through a lens, but through the eyes of a man who was living it. Dean Martin, the master of detachment, had done the one thing he was never supposed to do. He attached. He connected. He cared, visibly and devastatingly, in a room with no script, no director, and no way to control the narrative. He stayed for hours. He answered every question. He shook every hand. And when he left a different man in the eyes of those who saw him. But he also left a trail. This is where the story turns. This is the moment Hollywood panicked. Because when a star of that magnitude steps outside the system, he exposes the system. He shows that the walls are just scenery, the rules are just suggestions, the carefully curated image is a choice. The studio publicists, the network executives, the columnists who traded in gossip, they were terrified. What if other stars started getting real? What if they started answering their own mail? What if they started speaking as men instead of brands? Dean's act of profound humanity was, in the logic of the machine, an act of rebellion. It was dangerous. The retaliation was not a headline. It was a whisper. It was a cooling. The next Rat Pack reunion felt strained. The easy invitations to the big tables in Vegas became less frequent. There was a subtle reshaping of his public image in the press, leaning harder into the drunk, making him seem more out of touch, less substantial. The message was clear. Get back in the box. The ecosystem would tolerate his philanthropy if it was a televised charity gala. It would not tolerate a genuine, unmediated, unspun connection to the painful reality of the world. That was bad for business. And the cruelest cut of all, the war took his son. Not in Vietnam, but years later in 1987, when Dean Paul Martin, captain of the California Air National Guard, crashed his F-4 Phantom II into a mountain during a training exercise. The loss shattered Dean. It vaporized the last remnants of the carefree persona. The man who survived the mob, the studios, and the fickle heart of fame could not survive this. He retreated from the world entirely, a ghost in his own home, until his own death in 1995. So what is the legacy of that letter? It's not a statue. It's not a Grammy or a TV special. It's a fleeting, fragile moment in a quiet classroom where the most famous man in the world chose to be a father first. He traded a piece of his invincibility for a room full of tears. In the grand, corrupt, glittering narrative of classic Hollywood, it is a footnote. But in the story of who Dean Martin really was, it is the climax. They sold you the myth of the man who didn't care. They sold you the laughs, the songs, the smoky nightclubs. They buried the truth of the man who cared so much it terrified the very industry that created him. That letter, and what he did after reading it, was Dean Martin's greatest performance. And it was the only one he ever did for free, for no audience but the one that needed to hear it most. Hollywood builds its legends on fantasy. It buries its heroes in glitter. But sometimes, just sometimes, a single piece of paper, a single moment of devastating truth can cut through all of it. And in that cut, you see not a star, but a man. A man who just once put down the glass, dropped the act, and showed a room of strangers the only thing that was ever real, the terrifying, beautiful, heartbreaking cost of love. If you believe some truths are too important to stay buried, then you're one of us now. Help us keep uncovering them. Like, subscribe and share this with someone who still believes in the man behind the myth. This has been Hollywood Untold Files. The story doesn't end when the credits roll. It begins where the secrets are kept.